Picture your 5th birthday party. The blue frosting on the cake. Your mom singing off-key. The second you blew out the candles and everyone clapped. You can see it. You can almost taste it. Maybe it's not a birthday for you. Maybe it's the day your dog ran off, or the exact words someone said to you in a doorway. Whatever scene just built itself in your head, it came fast, it came in color, and it came with a feeling of total certainty. Here's the strange part. That memory might not exist, not the way you think it does. A memory isn't a video file your brain pulls up and replays. It's something your brain builds, right there in the moment you're remembering it, out of scraps. A photo you've seen 100 times, a story your aunt tells every Thanksgiving, a guess your brain fills in to finish the picture, stitched together so smoothly you'd swear on it in court. And none of that stitching feels like guessing. It feels exactly like remembering. Whether it happened exactly the way you picture it, happened differently, or didn't happen at all, you would have no way of telling from the inside. Psychologists have a name for a memory that feels completely real and never actually happened. They call it a false memory. For the last 50 years, one researcher has spent her whole career proving how easily they get built. A false memory isn't the same thing as forgetting. Forgetting is your brain losing a piece of the picture. This is the opposite. Your brain adds a piece that was never there in the first place, and it does it so seamlessly the finished memory feels just as vivid, just as certain, as anything you actually lived through. That's what makes it dangerous. A blurry memory you doubt. A confident one you don't. It started with something as small as a single word. In 1974, psychologist Elizabeth Loftus sat college students down and showed them a short film of a car crash. Nothing dramatic. Footage pulled from a driver's ed course. Afterward, she asked how fast the cars were going when they hit each other. Except she didn't always say hit. For some groups, it was smashed. For others, collided. Bumped. Contacted. Same footage. Same crash. 5 different words. The smashed group guessed the cars were going about 41 miles an hour. The contacted group guessed 32. One verb. 9 miles an hour of difference. Here's where it gets unsettling. A week later, Loftus asked the smashed group one more question. Did you see any broken glass? There wasn't any. Never was. But the people who'd heard smashed said yes, more than twice as often as everyone else. The word hadn't just changed a guess about speed. It had reached backward and edited what they thought they'd seen. It's not that anyone was lying about the glass either. The word smashed carries its own baggage, shattered headlights, flying debris, a worse crash than what was actually on the screen. Once that idea took hold, some part of the brain treated it as evidence, filed it right alongside the real footage, until the two blended into a single memory. Loftus called it the misinformation effect. One leading question, planted at the right moment, quietly rewrites a memory that's already sitting in your head. Since then, researchers have run versions of this same experiment again and again. With different footage, different crimes, different wording, the pattern holds every time. The exact words used to ask about an event can change what people report remembering about it. It's a big part of why police departments and courts eventually started paying closer attention to exactly how witnesses get questioned. And if a word can do that to something you actually watched happen, imagine what it could do to something you never saw at all. So Loftus pushed further. Could you plant a memory that isn't edited, but invented from nothing? In 1995, she and a colleague, Jacqueline Pickrell, recruited 24 people and quietly called up an older relative of each one. Give us 3 real memories from their childhood, they asked. Nothing traumatic, ordinary stuff. Then they slipped in a 4th story, one that never happened. Every participant read that they'd gotten lost in a shopping mall around age 5, crying, scared, rescued by an elderly stranger, then reunited with their family. The setup mattered. The fake story sat right there on the page next to 3 memories that were completely real, in the same format, the same length. Nothing marked it as different. Nothing told anyone's brain, this one's fabricated, look closer. About a quarter of the group didn't just accept the story. They remembered it. Some added details the researchers never gave them. What the store looked like, how the stranger's cardigan felt, exactly how relieved they were to see their mother's face. And each time researchers circled back and asked again, some of those false accounts didn't get thinner. They got thicker, new sensory details stacking on top of the last telling, the way a story naturally sharpens every time you tell it at a dinner table. A few, told afterward that the whole thing was invented, still didn't believe it. Their brain had finished the story so well, it felt more solid than some of their real memories sitting right next to it. Researchers even asked people to rate how clearly they could picture each memory and how confident they felt in it. On average, the fake mall memory scored a little lower than the real ones, but for a meaningful share of the group, it didn't score lower at all. It felt every bit as real. One planted sentence, a quarter of a room now carrying a childhood memory that flat out never occurred. And Loftus wasn't done yet, because the mall study still needed a suggestion, a relative vouching for the story, a researcher nudging it along. What if you stripped all of that away and left nothing but a list of words? In 1995, Henry Roediger and Kathleen McDermott read people a list. Bed, rest, awake, tired, dream, pillow, snore. 15 words in a row, everyone pointing at the same idea. This wasn't one obscure trick list either. Roediger and McDermott built dozens of these lists, each one a cluster of words orbiting a single missing idea, and ran the test again and again. Notice what's missing. The word sleep never appears. Not once. Ask people afterward what was on the list, and most of them will tell you flatly that sleep was there. They'll rate their confidence just as high as they do for words that actually were on the list. Nobody planted a story here. Nobody suggested a thing. Their own brain reached for the one word that made the pattern complete and handed it back as a memory. That's the part that makes this study land harder than the other two. Nobody in the room was trying to trick anyone. The false memory built itself purely from the shape of the list. And it's held up across age groups, across languages, across decades of researchers running the same basic setup with new lists. 3 different setups: a leading question, a planted story, a list of words with a gap in the middle. 3 completely different false memories. Every single one of them felt, from the inside, exactly like the real thing. Here's what ties all 3 studies together. Your memory was never built to be a filing cabinet. It's closer to a construction site. Every time you remember something, your brain doesn't pull the original file out of storage. It rebuilds the scene, right then, out of whatever material is lying around. The real memory, sure, but also photos you've seen since, stories you've been told, assumptions your brain quietly uses to fill the gaps. Most of the time, the rebuild is close enough that it doesn't matter. But sometimes the material is wrong, or missing, or planted on purpose. And the finished memory doesn't come with a warning label. It doesn't feel reconstructed. It feels remembered. You don't need a psychology lab to see this play out. It's every family argument about how a holiday actually went. Every story that gets a little cleaner, a little more dramatic, every single time it gets told again. Loftus didn't stop at the lab. She took this research straight into real courtrooms, testifying or consulting in several hundred cases, including the trial of the police officers charged in the Rodney King beating and the O.J. Simpson trial. Her argument, case after case, was the same thing her studies kept proving. A witness can be completely honest, completely confident, and still completely wrong. That argument made her a target. When she pushed back on claims of childhood memories recovered years later in therapy, arguing many of them were built the same way as the mall story, she collided with researchers who study real, documented cases of trauma being forgotten and later remembered. It's a genuine, still unsettled scientific fight. It also got her death threats. Both sides of that fight agree on one thing. Memory is not a passive recording. It's an active, ongoing act of construction, and construction leaves room for error, whether the error shows up by accident or on purpose. And it connects to something with stakes outside any lab or courtroom argument. Look at DNA exonerations in the United States. Roughly 7 in 10 of them involved a witness who stood up in court, under oath, and confidently pointed at the wrong person. That witness almost certainly wasn't lying. Their brain had built a memory and handed it to them as fact, the same way it built the broken glass, the mall, the word sleep. So the next time you're arguing with a sibling about how a summer really went, or you'd bet money on something you saw with your own eyes, sit with this for a second. Somewhere, right now, someone else is just as certain about a memory that flatly contradicts yours, and they're not lying either. Confidence was never proof. It never was. Not for you, not for the witness on the stand, not for the researcher holding the clipboard. Your brain doesn't store your life. It keeps rebuilding it, one memory at a time, and it never tells you which parts are original and which parts it just filled in. It doesn't leave a seam where the real memory ends and the filler starts. There's no version of the file where you can go back and check. Maybe that 5th birthday really did happen exactly the way you picture it. Or maybe, somewhere between the photograph and the story and the candles you've pictured 100 times since, your brain finished the scene for you. You'll probably never know which. And neither, most of the time, will a jury watching a witness who's every bit as certain as you feel right now. That's the part worth sitting with.